Before we start, I just want to go over a couple of rules with the media that's here. I think the TV cameras are all set up. The one I'm more concerned about than anything are the handheld cameras. Nobody's got a camera that's going to make a big noise or anything like that. That's not allowed. No moving around in the courtroom once we start. Just stay where you are. Don't get up to take pictures. Don't be milling around. Not a lot of in and out of the courtroom. Once you're in, you're in. If you go out, you may not be allowed back in. So we just don't want anything to disrupt the hearing. Buzz, if you stay in here, you don't holler out at me, okay?
Yeah.
You can't speak. Now you got to be quiet if we let you stay in here. If you make a noise, they're going to take you out, okay? All right, you stay right there, but you got to be quiet. All right. Anybody had any questions? All right, good deal. We'll start in just a few minutes.
testimony shall be heard. God bless this honorable court of the United States of America. You may be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is General Sessions Court. Today we have a preliminary hearing for Michael Cummins, and I believe they're bringing Mr. Cummins in. I'm going to give him a chance to get him over here with his attorney. All right. Mr. Simmons, Mr. Bruno, y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
General, you ready?
Ready. Ready.
Today is May the 29th, 2019. We're here for a preliminary hearing for Michael Lee Cummins. Mr. Cummins is charged with criminal homicide, theft over $10,000, first-degree murder times 7, and attempted first-degree murder. Mr. Cummins is represented by Attorney Jim Simmons and Paul Bruno. The state is represented by Attorney General Ray Whitley and Assistant Attorneys General Ron Blanton and Eric Mulder. Everyone that's going to testify, please stand and raise your right hand. Come out here so I can see you, please. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right, General, who's your first witness?
Lance Hampton,
All right.
Our case officer is Special Agent Andrew Gray. I'd like him to stay before me.
All right, the prosecutor can stay in. Room requested for the other witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, the other witness will have to wait in the back. Ms. Hampton, if you'll have a seat here, please speak into the microphone. This hearing is being recorded.
Yes, sir.
All right, General.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And for the attorneys, y'all all have done this before. You're welcome to use the podium, use that microphone, or you can use the microphone at your table, whichever is most convenient for you. All right, General.
Would you state your full name, please?
Lance Hampton,
And what is your occupation or profession?
a detective with Sumner County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the sheriff's office?
About 26 years,
And how long have you been a detective?
since 2000.
All right. I'd like to ask you if on April the 27th of 2019 you had an opportunity to go to 1177 Charles Brown Road here in Sumner County.
Yes, sir.
All right. What time did you get a call to go to that area?
I believe it was around 4 p.m.
Where were you when you got the call?
I was actually in Nashville with another detective working on a case.
What did you do when you got the call about 1177 Charles Brown Road?
I left Nashville and went to Charles Brown Road.
What was the nature of the call that you did get?
I was notified that there was multiple bodies inside of a residence.
All right.
So once I arrived on the scene, there was already another detective on the scene, but he was in another area. I got on the scene and went straight to the officer that was the responding officer,
Who was that?
Deputy Michael Idaresta.
All right. And did you speak with Deputy Idaresta?
I did.
Just tell us what you did, what you saw.
I said, "Can you describe to me what's going on here?" He said, he responded to a call that there was bodies inside of a residence, this particular residence. He got there. He said he went in to check the residence, started going through the residence, and he just started describing that there was bodies. Once you went inside the residence in the living area, he was telling me there was a body that was under a couch. There was a body that was on the couch. He said there was bodies in the right, facing the trailer on the right side of the trailer. He said there was a body in there, and also there was a female that was still breathing.
Was she in there when you arrived?
No, sir. She had already been life flighted.
All right. So what did you do when you got this information?
I was gathering the information, and at that point, my supervisor, Major Tim Bailey, informed me that TBI was coming to take over the investigation. So at that point, the residence was secured, and I started doing interviews, and we were waiting for TBI's arrival.
Did you yourself go into the residence where the bodies were?
I did not.
Did you look into the residence?
I was able to see inside the residence, and I could see a female inside the residence, just inside the living room there.
Alive or deceased?
She appeared to be deceased.
All right. So you started interviewing people there on the scene?
Yes, sir.
Did anything happen while you were interviewing people?
Yes, sir. After Deputy IRS had informed me that there were several bodies inside the residence, he also informed me that Michael Cummins was the suspect. He said that Michael Cummins was last seen running from the residence in the wooded area towards the creek. There was multiple agencies there, multiple officers already conducting a search.
And what were they searching for?
They were searching for Michael Cummins. We were informed that he stayed in the creek bed a lot in that area.
Did you participate in the search for Michael Cummins?
I did not. I was doing interviews.
All right.
But while doing the interviews, we were informed that there was a black Kia that was located in the creek bed.
Creek bed where?
Located behind the residence. It would be to the right of the residence, but it was in the creek that was behind it.
All right. What about the Kia?
I asked what the registration came back to, and I was told that it came back to 1555 Luby Brown Road. So at that point, Chris Tarlackey and I went to that residence.
Who is Chris Tarlackey?
He's a lieutenant with the sheriff's office. He's over the Warrants Division.
All right.
He and I got in his car, went to 1555 Luby Brown Road.
Why did you do that?
That registration on that vehicle was registered to 1555 and to Shirley Furley.
All right.
So we went to the residence. Detective Brandon Clark came and met with us at the residence. We did a perimeter search of the residence and located a door facing the house on the left side that was unlocked. Then we went to the front door, and the front door was unlocked also. We made entry into the residence, and once we got inside the residence, about 3 feet from the door was a female on her back with obvious trauma to the head and face, and her left arm appeared to have been as if it had been 360 degrees spun around. It was obvious that she was deceased at that point. We left Chris Tarlackey in the area to where he could secure that room, and then Detective Clark and I secured the rest of the residence.
He said that you observed her injuries while she was lying there, right?
Yes, sir.
Where were the injuries?
To the head and to the facial area.
All right.
And then, of course, obviously the arm.
Okay. And so what did you do after you discovered Ms. Furley?
After securing the residence,
Did you know her name at that point?
I did not. The name may have come out over the radio when they gave the registration, but I don't remember that. I just remember the address.
What did you do to determine who she was?
On the way out, I looked at her again on the way out of the residence, stepped out of the residence, made notification to the command that we had another confirmed body inside this residence because they sent the medical examiners to our location. At that point, I went to the mailbox, opened it up, pulled a piece of mail out that had the name Shirley Furley on it.
Okay.
At that point, I went and pulled up the criminal justice portal and was able to find Shirley Furley's photo on her driver's license, and it matched the person that I had seen inside the residence.
All right. What type of area in the county was this house at 1555 Luby Brown Road?
It was in a rural area. There's not many houses on the road at all.
All right. Okay. What did you do after you determined who the person was that you found deceased?
After the medical examiner had come and pronounced her, secured the residence, and made my notification to command, and then I stayed there until TBI got on the scene, and then I assisted them with anything they needed, but they took over the scene.
Was the residence secured the whole time?
Yes, sir.
All right.
From the time that we got there, it was secured. Yes, sir.
After TBI arrived, did you do anything else that night?
At that residence, After we left there about 4 a.m., we went back to Charles Brown Road to the initial place that we were sent to, and then I was released from the scene not too long after that.
Do you know whether or not at that time when you were released, Michael Cummins had been taken into custody or not?
Yes, sir. He had been taken into custody. That was one thing that we, while we were securing that residence, while we were waiting on TBI.
You learned that, but you were not present over on Charles Brown Road when he was taken into custody.
No, sir, wasn't.
All right. I'd like for you to reflect your attention back to April the 17th of 2019. On that day, were you working on that day?
I was the on-call detective. I was off that night, but I got a call.
You got a call to do what?
To go to the residence across from 1260 Ransom Mandrill Road in Westmoreland.
Okay. What time did you get the call, day or night?
It was nighttime.
All right.
I was told that there was a house that there was an explosion from a house, and the person that lived inside the house was missing. I arrived on the scene and spoke with Lieutenant Mike Guthrie, and he informed me that there was a cabin that was across the street in the wooded area that had caught on fire, and they couldn't locate the resident. And the resident's name was Jim Dunn. And Jim Dunn's brother was standing there, and I spoke with him while we were standing there, and he described his brother to us, and he said
what was the description of his brother?
He said that his brother had grayish color hair, long hair, that he always wore keen hiking shoes, blue jeans, LL Bean shirt, and a makeshift belt, like he would use a t-shirt or blue jeans for the belt, but he always put the jeans on over another pair of pants, like a pair of sweatpants or something.
Did you yourself know Jim Dunn?
No, sir.
All right. Would you describe the area that you were in at this point when you're there at the scene?
Very rural, heavily wooded area. It's a cabin that was moved there about 25 years ago with no electricity and no water. And Jim Dunn was allowed to live on that property by Mr. Mandrill, who is deceased now, but he was allowed to live on that property. His wishes were that Mr. Dunn not ever be taken away from that property.
All right. Did you see the cabin or what was left of the cabin when you were there?
I saw the remains of the cabin.
All right. Was it still burning, or was it?
It was smoldering.
All right. Got a photograph here I'd like to pass it with.
You may.
I don't know how you want to handle these exhibits, Judge.
I'll mark them one at a time, or if you have a group, we can make a collective exhibit.
You'll mark them.
I will.
Can you identify what you're looking at there?
Yes, sir. That's the charred remains of what's left of the cabin.
All right. I'd like to make that exhibit 1, please.
Exhibit number 1.
All right. So what did you do after you got the description of Jim Dunn?
After it was determined that he was not inside checking the fire at the cabin area, and we were determined that he wasn't in there, we started doing a search of the area.
And what were you searching for?
For Jim Dunn.
Okay.
Detective Clark and I were walking together about 60 to 75 yards from the cabin. And we stepped into an area, and Detective Clark said, "Wait just a second," and looked to the right, and there was a body laying there, and the body, it was an obvious body, but the head was missing on the body.
Where was the body?
It was in a briar thicket, like a blackberry thicket.
Can you describe the area there?
Lots of thorns, lots of branches hanging over the body. The body was, he was on his back. His arms were above his head. The LL Bean shirt that the brother had previously described was about 3 feet above his head. He still had the jeans on, the makeshift belt, and the keen hiking shoes also, but his feet were facing away from us. The shoulder area was towards us.
All right. The body was missing the head. What did you do after you saw the body?
Informed there was other officers on the scene, said that we had located the body, but we were missing a head, and we needed to start a search with that. And about 20 yards from the body, the head was located.
Did you locate anything in addition to Mr. Dunn's body?
On that particular day, no, sir.
All right. What was it like out there where the body was found?
Pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. No communication whatsoever. It was it's a very remote area.
All right. Was an autopsy requested or ordered for Jim Dunn?
Yes, sir, it was.
All right. So did you do anything else after Mr. Dunn's body was found?
I spoke with Brad Dunn again, which is the brother, and was trying to see if there was any identifying property that Mr. Dunn may have had on the property.
Why were you doing that? Why were you interested in that?
I was just trying to see. We weren't sure of what was going on, if things had been stolen. We just didn't know what he had, what he did and didn't have.
Okay.
Brad Dunn had described that he had a lever action rifle, but he couldn't tell me anything about it. He said he just remembered his brother brought it 20 or 25 years ago. So that's all we searched on that particular night.
Did you have occasion to, well, let me ask you this first. In addition to the house, were there anything else there, automobiles, any means of transportation?
Yes, sir. There was 4 vehicles there. One that he actually drove. The other 3 stored things in. One may have firewood in it. One had tools. And he had a van that, on the night of, it had a dog, chickens inside of it that he stayed in. His brother told me when it got real cold that he would stay, instead of staying in the cabin because it didn't have electricity, he would stay inside the van.
All right. Did you have occasion to return to the scene on a subsequent or later day?
Yes, sir.
All right. Why?
We went back. We were trying to find anything related to a rifle. It was a 30. When we returned, we were looking for a shell casing that may match a rifle that had been located at Charles Brown Road. I had notified TBI on the night of April the 27th at the Charles Brown incident. I had notified them that we were missing, that I felt that these 2 cases were related, and that we were missing a rifle from Jim Dunn's residence. I spoke with Special Agent Russ Winkler, who told me that a lever action rifle had been found inside the Charles Brown residence.
What did that cause you to do when you got that information?
Well, I asked if I could get any of the information from that gun, and he said it wasn't available at the time, that he would take care of it, of getting the information for us. And then subsequently, he got us the information with the serial number, and then then they informed me that an ATF search had been performed on the gun.
All right. But what caused you to go back to the scene?
I was trying to locate any shell casings, spent shell casings that may match up to the gun that was located at Charles Brown Road.
Did you find any ammunition, shell casing, or anything of that nature?
Found 1 shell casing, a 30-30 shell casing inside the van in the cup holder area.
All right. Did that match the gun that was found, or did you know?
I do not know. It's been.
I mean, was it a 30-30?
Yes, sir.
30-30. That's what you were looking for?
Yes, sir.
And the night that you found the body of James Dunn, could you tell whether or not it had been freshly placed there, or had it been there for a while?
It appeared it had been there for a period of time, 3 or 4 days probably. Because of the weather conditions, from the day that we found him on April the 17th to 3 days prior to that, the weather ranged from 35 degrees to 78 degrees, so that affected how the body would have deteriorated.
All right, so the body had not been there, the body had been there quite a while when we saw the body.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell whether or not the head had been removed or whether or not it had done that by decomposition?
It appeared that it had been animal activity. We couldn't tell at the time, but it was obvious animal activity around the body. In the second search of the residence or of the property, we located between the body and where the head was located. It's a very thick area, and it's like rabbit holes, basically. There was hair in that 20-yard range. It was like the head had been drugged, and there was hair in each of those spots, like every 4 or 5 feet.
Okay. I believe that's all I have on direct, Your Honor.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes, Your Honor. I first asked for any jinx material under Rule 26.2.
Okay.
Don't really have any, Judge.
Okay. All right. He says he doesn't have it.
Yes, sir. Detective Hampton, I'm going to go back kind of chronologically, follow your direct on that. You said you arrived on the scene at Charles Brown Road and that there was another detective that was already on the scene.
Yes, sir. He was to the right of me. He was over talking to someone when I got there.
Okay. Do you know who that was?
It was Detective Mike McLaren.
And do you know who he was talking to?
I do not.
Okay. Do you know, upon your arrival, whether anybody had been in the residence prior to your arrival?
Outside of the officer that had been there?
I'm asking for anybody that had been in that residence, and I'm talking close in time to your arrival, within hours of your arrival. You know if anybody had been in that residence?
No, sir.
Okay. When you arrived, was there anyone in the residence that was not deceased? I know that you said there was a lady that had been in there that was life flighted. It appeared that other bodies, that those people were deceased. I'm talking about any law enforcement, anybody inside the residence when you arrived there?
No, sir. They were outside.
Okay. And then the whole time that you were there, before you left to go to Ms. Furley's house, did anybody enter the residence?
Not while I was there. I left the residence I probably wasn't at that residence 30 minutes before I left to go to the other address on Libby Brown.
Okay.
I didn't see no one went in there while I was there.
Okay. You told me that there was a detective that said there appeared to be a body under a couch, a body on a couch, and a body, I think, into the right. Who was that again that told you that?
It was the deputy, Mike Idaresta.
Okay.
He was the first responding officer on the scene.
Okay, and specifically with him, do you know whether or not he had entered the residence to make that observation, or whether he was able to make that observation from outside the residence?
He entered the residence and did a security sweep of the residence, was able to render aid to the lady that was transported.
Okay, and that's when I asked earlier, did you know if anybody had been in the residence? That's what I was referring to.
Okay, I misunderstood you. He's the only one that he also informed me that the medical examiner, once he got the lady out of there that was still alive, he informed me that as he continued his search of the residence to check for other bodies or other people that could still have been alive, and then once he realized they were deceased, he contacted the medical examiner. The medical examiner came in and pronounced them.
Okay, all right. You said he did a protective sweep or a search, I think is what he indicated to you, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And my understanding of that is he would have gone into the residence and basically checked the entire residence to see if there were any other people in the residence.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is it your understanding that that's what he did?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said at that point you shifted to doing interviews, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Who did you interview?
Brian Cummins, Sherry, I don't know Sherry's last name, and a Hastings subject, and but I was stopped at that point because of the registration, so I didn't even finish the third interview at that point. That's when I got in the car and went to the other address.
Okay. Did you interview Brian Cummins at what I would call at the scene?
Across the street in a driveway, yes, sir.
Okay. And was Mr. Cummins already there when you arrived?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you interviewed him, and then somebody by the name of Sherry. Was Sherry already at the scene?
Yes, sir.
And did you interview her, what I would say, at the scene?
In the driveway across the street, yes.
Okay. And Hastings you referred to as a subject. What do you mean when you say subject?
That was just the name, that's just what I referred to him as. It's nothing, I think his name was Hastings, that's the reason I said that.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I don't have my notes there.
Okay. But at some point you took notes with regard to your interviews?
I did.
Did you audio record any of the interviews as well?
I did.
Okay. So those are 3 people that were interviewed. Anybody else did you interview at that scene?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Then you were called away. We heard about the Kia being found. The Kia, how close was the Kia to the residence on Charles Brown?
Probably a half mile. The creek is directly behind the residence, but the creek runs to Keene Hollow and Charles Brown Road, and it was right off of the bridge area on Charles Brown Road where Keene Hollow runs parallel to it.
Okay.
Maybe a half mile.
Maybe, but it wasn't something that wasn't on the property or in the backyard or something like that. It's a pretty good distance away.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then when you went to Miss Furley's residence, and you saw her body inside the residence, and we heard what you did there, do you have any opinion about how long her body had been there before you discovered it?
I do not.
When you went to the cabin area, you said you got a call about a possible explosion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ever determine, well, let me ask you this, when you arrived at the cabin, who was there?
Down next to you have to remember the cabin is probably, from the road, it's probably 500 yards down into a wooded area, so you have to go down an old logging road to get to it. There was some fire personnel. Detective Brandon Clark was on the scene, and Deputy Miranda Vaughn were there.
Okay. You mentioned Mr. Dunn's brother, Brad Dunn, I believe is his name.
He was at the top of the road at the actual 1260 Ransom Manual in the driveway.
Okay. Do you have any idea who reported the explosion?
I do. I don't know if her last name is Mandrel, but it's Mr. Mandrel's daughter. Her name is Ritza. She lives next door to the property. She lives on the Mandrel property. She and her brother are kind of like the caretakers of the property.
Okay. Do you happen to know if in fact there was an explosion, or do you know what the cause of the fire was at the cabin?
I do not know if there was an explosion, and the cause of the fire is undetermined.
Okay. But if I have the timeline correctly, this was on 4/17, and regardless of the cause of the fire, you said it was smoldering and fire people had come there, so it appears that it had been very recently, it was on fire very recently, whatever the
Fire
cause
had
was.
just happened.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that you think 3 or 4 days, is the estimate, I understand, that Mr. Dunn his body had been in the woods.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said where his body was, there was it appeared to be obvious animal activity, I think is what you said. Can you give me more information about that?
Well, you could see where animals have been walking in that area like they had bedded down. They had used the bathroom right next to the body. It was just like burr holes, basically, or there was briars that were hanging across the body. It didn't appear that anybody could walk through there because it was so thick.
Okay. With regard to the weapon, the rifle that was located the rifle was located, I believe you said, at the residence on Charles Brown Road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know with when the rifle was located, whether or not it was loaded, if it had bullets in it? Do you know what that?
I do not.
Okay.
I was just notified by TBI that they had located that gun was inside the residence, and then they did the search on it. But according to the brother, he had not fired that gun in years.
Okay. All right. In with these three scenes, I'll call them three different scenes.
Okay.
Was there any indication that from anywhere that a rifle or any other kind of gun had been fired, other than the casing I think that you said was found in the shell casing I think that was found in the van? Other than that shell casing found in the cup holder in the van, did there appear, through injuries to the bodies, anything in the residences that any gun had been shot, the rifle or any other gun?
I can't speak to Charles Brown, but no on the other two.
Okay. Have you interviewed Mr. Michael Cummins at any time from the time you arrived?
I have not.
Okay. Can you give me the distance roughly between the Charles Brown residence and the Luby Brown Road residence? Roughly. I'm really trying to get, are they next door to each other, or are they the same kind of road, or is it a half mile, a mile, couple miles?
If you travel through the woods and you travel through the creek, they're relatively close.
Mm-hmm.
By road, you have to go around. It's not far, a half mile probably in circumference there.
Okay. And the cabin, roughly where is that in relation, let's just say Charles Brown?
To Charles Brown, if you were to go, you could walk out of the cabin through the wooded area across the creek, and you would be on Charles. You would come out at Charles Brown and Keene Hollow Road, and then it's probably a quarter mile up Charles Brown Road.
Okay. Have you conducted any other interviews other than those three that were on the 27th, I believe? Have you conducted any other interviews subsequent to that date related to this case?
Yes, with TBI, I have been on several interviews with them.
Okay. And who have you interviewed with them?
Sherry, Dwayne is a cousin.
Robinson.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian. Interviewed James Hastings. They call him Bubby.
Is that the James? You said Hastings earlier at the scene. Is that a different
It's a different
Hastings?
one.
Okay.
And I may have the name wrong on the original one.
Okay. So I've got, after the fact, Sherry, is that a second interview with the same Sherry that was at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A second interview with Brian Cummins?
Yes, sir.
An interview with Dwayne Robinson?
Yes, sir.
And an interview with a James Hastings, not the same Hastings as the original interview.
James Hastings' father, or stepfather, soon to be stepfather, is Brian Cummins, I believe.
Okay. If I may just have 1 second, Your Honor, to confirm, Mr. Cummins. Just briefly, do you know if anyone from law enforcement has interviewed Michael Cummins? I know you said you didn't, but do you know if anybody else from law enforcement has interviewed him?
Yes, sir.
Who was that?
Major Tim Bailey, he's with the sheriff's office. Special Agent Andrew Graves with TBI. Special Agent Russ Winkler. And I've lost my train of thought. Jim with the TBI. I can't think of his last name now.
Okay. The interview with Bailey, do you know where that was?
All the interviews were at Skyline Medical Center.
Okay. Which is where Mr. Cummins was taken after he had been shot, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So these all took place while he was hospitalized?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know how many different interviews took place? I don't know if you were telling me that
I
4
think there
people
were
interviewed
two.
at once? Okay.
I think that initially there was 2.
Okay. Just one follow-up question. Do you know if any of those interviews were recorded? Either audio or video recorded?
They were.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
General, any redirect?
I have one question.
General, if you don't mind, use the microphone so we make sure we get it on the recording.
I'll just walk over.
Okay, all right.
The hatchet that was found in the vicinity of Jim Dunn's body that you testified about, did you all seize that hatchet?
Yes, sir. It was submitted to TBI.
Okay, so it's in custody of the TDI at this point.
Yes, sir.
As far as you know, there haven't been any results one way or the other regarding that hatchet at this point.
No, I don't know the results.
If there are any results.
Right.
Okay, that's all I have, Judge.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, officer. You can step down. Please stay in the courtroom or you're free to leave. Call your next witness.
Andrew Graves.
All right, Officer Graves, you'll come up, please. And you will see, please use the microphone.
Would you tell us your full name, please?
Yes, sir. It's Andrew Neil Graves,
Would you spell your last name?
Graves.
And Mr. Graves, what is your occupation or profession?
I'm a special agent with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
How long have you been with the TBI?
A little over 2 years now.
All right. Did you have anything to do with this particular case?
Yes, sir.
Are you the case agent?
Yes, sir.
Did you have occasion to go to 1177 Charles Brown Road
Yes.
in Sumner County?
Yes, sir, I did.
What were your initial responsibilities with regard to this particular case?
To obtain a search warrant for the residence, that was the first thing that I did. Was I responded to the sheriff's office and had a detective assist me with a search warrant for 1177 Charles Brown Road
And what was the purpose of getting the search warrant?
to be able to search the residence at 1177 Charles Brown Road.
All right. You had at some point been advised as to what this case was about.
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you get the search warrant?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do with it?
Executed that later that evening on the 27th at the house, and members of the VCRT
Okay.
investigated the crime scene.
Don't go into a big hurry, but I want to make sure everybody understands. You brought the search warrants to 1177 Charles Brown Road.
Yes, sir.
And who, if anybody, from law enforcement had been in the house as far as you know?
I believe to do a protective sweep check for any victims, things of that nature.
Okay. Now, do you know what is the VCRT?
It's a group of forensic scientists with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. VCRT stands for the Violent Crime Response Team, and they will go out to assist agents on a case-by-case basis on scenes.
Was the Violent Crimes Research Response Team called out at that point?
Yes, sir.
Were they on the scene when you arrived with the search warrants?
Yes, sir.
When you arrived and the search warrants were served, the team went in and began this investigation. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I believe a couple of the team members went in first with animal control to remove some animals from the scene, and then they began to go through the scene once we had heard that Michael Cummins had been taken into custody.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to ask you. Were you aware when you got to the scene that there was a search going on for Michael Cummins?
Yes, sir. On the way over to the scene, I heard through our radio channel that the plane had spotted a person in the wood line, and was hearing that on the way over. And then when we got over there, a short time later, heard gunshots, and then heard that a subject was in custody.
Were you at the house at 1177 Charles Brown Road when he was taken into custody?
Yes, sir.
You were not one of the officers that were participating in arresting him and taking him into custody?
No, sir.
All right. Did you hear the shots?
I did.
Was it more than one?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you see Michael Cummins?
Not at that time. No, sir.
Okay. Did you go into the house at 1177 Charles Brown Road?
I did. Not immediately, but on through the investigation, I did.
All right. But did you go in there while the VCRT team was in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you being kept up to date on the investigation and their findings while you were there at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Were you aware of a rifle that was discovered at 1177 Charles Brown Road?
Yes, sir.
What kind of rifle was it?
It was a 30-30 model 94. I can't remember the exact brand, but I do remember it being a 30-30.
All right. Did you get any more specific information as the investigation went on?
Yes, sir. We were able to identify the weapon through an E-trace. However, at the scene, we discovered that the rifle appeared to be in two segments.
All right.
I'm sorry, it appeared to what?
The rifle, there were two portions of the rifle. One where you had the metal like barrel and trigger assembly, then you had the butt stock that was separated.
I've got two photos I'm going to show to you and ask you if you can identify either one or both of these photos.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. If you would hold it up to the judge and let the judge see what they are. What are they?
These are the rifle recovered from the scene.
All right. They're not a complete picture of the rifle.
Correct.
But does one of the pictures have a serial number on it?
Yes, sir, it does.
What does the other one have?
It is displaying that it's a Winchester Model 94 30-30, and then the location where it was manufactured.
I'd like to make that collective exhibit number 2, to be honest.
All right, we'll mark this collective exhibit 2. All right, gentlemen.
At some point after you had received obtained the serial number and the make of the rifle, did you cause an investigation as to where the rifle had been?
Yes, sir, I contacted an agent with the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and provided him the serial number, and he was able to perform an E-trace, which...
Tell the judge and everybody here what an E-trace
Sir. So when you run a serial number, model number, things of that nature, they're able to come back, and a lot of times if it was purchased from a gun store, any type of gun store, pawn shop, things like that, the person who originally bought it and then the purchase date, and then more information about the weapon itself, like the make and model.
Did you get any results from the requested search of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms?
Yes, sir.
I've got another piece of paper here. Can you identify that?
Yes, sir. This is what I received the following day from the agent with ATF, and this is a firearms trace summary.
Explain exactly what it is and what it says.
Yes, sir. So it has the agent on the left-hand side who performed the e-trace, and on the right-hand side it has firearm information. And you want me to go in detail on that as well? Manufacturer is a Winchester, model 94, caliber 30-30, serial number is 4754889, and country was United States. And then purchaser information was purchase date was April 1st, 1980, and it was purchased by Jim Fox Dunn of Waller Road, Route 1 in Brentwood, Tennessee, with a date of birth 11/2/55. And then the dealer information was that it was purchased from a service merchandise store at 4225 Knowlesville Road in Nashville, Tennessee.
Now, this information is on this e-trace form, match the information as far as serial number and make of rifle with the information that's enclosed there in exhibit number 2.
Yes, sir, it does.
All right. So I can make that exhibit number 3, please, Jim.
All right, exhibit number 3.
Now, during the course of the investigation that you yourself were an active part of or direct participant in, did you seize or obtain any other evidence?
Yes, sir.
What did you seize?
Multiple items through the VCRT as well as myself during the investigation. It was multiple pages.
All right. Got a picture of a couple of blue shoes here,
Yes, sir.
blue and black shoes. Can you identify that picture?
Yes, sir. Those are shoes that were recovered from the residence from underneath an outbuilding at 245 Keene Hollow Road, or it's also been notated in by some as 1245 Charles Brown Road.
All right. Now, who lived at 245 Keene Hollow Road?
Yes, sir. Dwayne Robinson, Brian Cummins, and Sherry Robinson.
Would you tell the court and everyone here what caused you to go over and seize this pair of shoes?
Yes, sir. I'd received information that Michael Cummins had left a pair of shoes over there, and that they were still at the residence, and that multiple family members at that residence had seen him wearing those shoes.
All right. I would like to make that the next exhibit.
Exhibit number 4.
Agent Graves, I've got 2 more pictures I'd like to show to you and ask you if you can identify them.
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, what do they show?
They are of the outbuilding where Dwayne stays in or resides at the property at 245 Keene Hollow Road.
All right. And what does it show in that picture?
It shows the outbuilding, and then underneath the porch, you can see the pair of shoes that I was directed to.
All right. And that's from the point from which you seized the shoes.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make that exhibit number 5.
Number 5. Collected
Now, directing your attention to May the 5th of 2019, did you have occasion to speak to the defendant?
Yes, sir.
Michael Cummins, along with someone else?
Yes, sir.
Would you tell the judge about that, please?
Yes, sir. On May 5th, myself, Special Agent in Charge Russ Winkler, and Major Tim Bailey with the Sumner County Sheriff's Office traveled to Skyline Medical Center to interview Mr. Cummins.
All right. He was still there, being treated there at the hospital at that time.
He was, yes, sir.
Was he advised of his constitutional rights?
Yes, sir.
Without going through all the rights, was he advised of full Miranda warnings?
Yes, sir.
Did he agree to speak with you?
He did.
During the course of this conversation or this interview, were these shoes that we just talked about here, the blue shoes mentioned?
They were, yes, sir.
Okay. Would you tell us about what he said about them?
Yes, sir. He said that he had received those shoes from Charles Wholesale, one of the victims in the residence, and that he had been wearing them for the past 3 to 4 days, and then he said maybe up to a week that he'd been wearing those shoes.
Did he say anything about wearing any other shoes there during this period of time?
Yes, sir. He said once he left those at Dwayne's residence that Dwayne gave him another pair to wear.
All right. Are you aware of any other shoes that were seized pursuant to the search warrant there at 1177 Charles Brown Road?
Yes, sir. On that second search warrant, there were a pair of shoes that were recovered from 2 members of our violent crime response team, and I was advised that they were behind the washer and dryer in the residence at 1177 Charles Brown Road.
All right. Did you ask him about those shoes?
Yes, sir. We did.
All right. What did you ask him?
We asked him if he had seen those before, if he'd worn them, and he said that those were his father's old shoes and that he didn't remember wearing them. He didn't think he'd ever worn them. And then shortly after that, he said he might have worn them one time.
Did you show him pictures of the shoes?
Yes, sir.
Can you identify the pictures in these three, the shoes in these 3 pictures?
Yes, sir.
What are they?
Those are the shoes that I was advised that were recovered from behind the washer and dryer at 1177 Charles Brown Road.
All right, were those the shoes in the picture that you showed to Michael Cummins?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make that the next exhibit collected, please, Judge.
He collected number 6. All right, gentlemen.
Did you, Agent Craig, speak to the injured lady that survived, Mary Sue Wholesale?
Yes, sir, I did.
Where did you speak to her?
At the hospital at Skyline Medical Center.
She was at Skyline as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. And do you have, of course, an opportunity to observe her?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell whether or not she had been injured?
Significantly injured, yes, sir.
What kinds of injuries could you see?
Mostly to her skull, around her jaw area in particular.
All right. And she couldn't remember, understand anything that had happened at that time?
Of the particular incident, no, sir.
Right. Right. Did she tell you where she lived?
Yes, sir. At 1177 Charles Brown Road, and she stated, along with the victims there, she gave their names.
All right. That's all the direct I have, Your Honor.
Right, Mr. Bruno?
Again, I'd ask for any jinx material, 26.2 material.
We don't have any yet. It's pretty early in the beginning right now.
Thank you. Agent Graves, I believe you said that when you responded to the scene, that there were already other law enforcement officers there, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And to your knowledge, and I think you said that there was an agent, Chad Ford. You said that there was an agent, maybe I misunderstood, there was an agent that, or some officer that had already done a protective sweep on the house?
I wasn't aware of what deputies that were out there, but I was aware that they had gone through the scene
Okay.
to check for victims. I don't know any names though of who was there.
I must have misunderstood you. Okay, but somebody had gone through and done a protective sweep.
Yes, sir.
And after that sweep, were you told how many bodies were in the house?
An initial count, yes.
And what was that?
I believe, I can't say for certain, but 3 to 4.
And medical examiner had already been in the residence, is that correct?
I think with for EMS. Yes, sir.
Any other, to your knowledge, have there been any other law enforcement officers in the residence other than the one that had done the protective sweep?
No, sir, just those initial deputies.
You said you obtained a search warrant for the residence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then when you came back, I'm assuming you and others executed the search warrant. You talked about there being 3 pages of items that were seized, and I take it that's from multiple law enforcement officers doing the search, is that correct?
Yes, sir, and it was multiple pages. It was even more than 3 pages. I can't say the exact amount, but I'm pretty certain it was more than that even.
Fair, and so, do you know about what time you returned with the search warrant?
I'd say roughly 9 o'clock.
Okay. And this is still on 4/27?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. When you returned at 9 o'clock, did you immediately begin executing the search warrant at that point in time?
No, sir.
Okay. When did you begin, or when I say you, I'm referring to law enforcement collectively, when did law enforcement begin to execute the search warrant? What I mean by that, actually enter into the property for purposes of recovering anything pursuant to the search warrant?
I believe it was shortly after we had been advised that Mr. Cummins had been taken into custody.
Okay. It's my understanding that he was taken into custody sometime around 10 or 10:30. Is that accurate?
That sounds, and I don't have my paperwork with me, but that sounds.
Okay. Roughly, so it was that night.
Yes, sir.
We agree to that, and it wasn't too long after you had returned with the search warrant. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so then it's at that point, is my understanding, what you're telling me is that after he was taken into custody, law enforcement began executing the search warrant.
Yes.
Okay. And you were one of those participants, correct?
Not initially. Members of the VCRT went in first because they know what to look for a little bit better at the beginning.
And do you know how long it took to execute that search warrant?
Yes, sir. So they began that night, and then roughly until about 9 to 10 p.m. Sunday night.
You had mentioned, I believe, about a second search warrant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me when you obtained that?
Yes, sir. I believe it was on the following Wednesday, and I believe that's May 1st.
Okay. And what was for lack of a better word, the object of that search warrant? What did that search warrant allow you to search?
To look for additional items that might have been left behind, such as shoes or anything of that nature.
At the same Charles Brown residence?
Yes, sir.
So at the time that, I know there was a different officer that arrived earlier than you, but let's say from the time you arrived until the time of the execution of the second search warrant, we're talking 4 or 5 days, roughly, is that right?
From Saturday night to Wednesday morning,
Okay.
roughly.
Was the residence secured?
Yes, when I came Wednesday morning, it had been boarded up, and I think nails or screws had been placed through the boards.
I need to be more specific with my question. Had that residence been secured by law enforcement, meaning law enforcement personnel? Had they been there from Sunday to the Wednesday?
No, sir.
Do you know when it had been boarded up?
No, sir.
Did you recover anything of significance when you executed the second search warrant?
That's when the secondary pair of shoes were recovered, and I don't know what additional items the members of the violent crime response team obtained at that point. I wasn't inside with them when they recovered that.
So the rifle, you had 2 pictures of the rifle, or the serial number with regards to the rifle. So did you observe the rifle while at the scene?
I did.
Okay. And you said it was in 2 pieces?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that the 2 pieces, would that be a natural break in the rifle where you could undo the stock, or did it appear to be damaged?
It appeared to have been damaged.
Okay. Did you check and see if there were any bullets inside the rifle?
No, sir.
Has anybody checked to see if there's any bullets in the rifle?
There is a firearms person or expert on that team that when weapons, like when firearms are recovered, that's their specialty, and that's what they would do.
Okay. But you didn't just take a cursory look at it when you had it in your possession?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there any indication, based on the search that you did inside the residence of Charles Brown, that any weapon, any gun, any type of firearm had been shot in that residence?
Not fired, no.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, correct.
Shot, any
No, sir.
bullets have been fired? Okay.
No bullets have been fired that I could observe.
I'm going to kind of shift gears to the interview of Mr. Cummins at Skyline Medical Center. It's my understanding it was you, Mr. Weaver, and Mr. Bailey.
Yes, sir.
And that this was done on let me back up a second. On 4/27, when Mr. Cummins was taken into custody, you said you heard gunshots.
Yes, sir.
You heard multiple gunshots, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many?
I would have estimated 20 to 30 or 15 to 30, something like that. It was more than 5, more than 10, but it wasn't
Okay.
more than 30 that I could hear.
So you think you heard 15 to 20 to 30 shots, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that all of those were from law enforcement, correct?
That's what I've been advised.
That Mr. Cummins did not have a firearm in his possession.
That's what I've been told, sir.
And of those 15 to 20 to 30 shots, do you know how many of them hit Mr. Cummins?
I was told 1.
Okay. And I believe his lower leg was hit, is that correct?
That's what I was told.
Did significant damage to the buttons, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. That's why he was in Skyline Hospital, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So when you arrived, he had been there roughly 8-9 days, fair assessment?
When I
Continuously in the hospital.
When I arrived at the hospital on the
To do
5th,
interview.
yes.
Right. You mentioned the reading of his rights to him.
Yes.
You said that he's drug rights read. So my question is, was the entire interview audio and or video recorded?
Audio recorded, yes, sir.
Okay. Including the reading of the rights?
Yes.
Okay, so, and was there one recorder that you were responsible for, or all 3 of you recording it?
I know I personally had one.
Okay.
I don't know if any others were being used at that time.
Did you ever, so that entire interview is recorded from the very beginning, first words to the last words, to the time y'all leave, correct?
I believe so, yes,
Okay.
right from the very beginning.
All right. Was there any other interviews conducted by you or anyone else of Mr. Cummins?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and who participated? How many others?
We had attempted to speak with him on the night that he was transported to Skyline. However, due to his medical state, we were unable to speak to him at that time. So the first formal interview would have been, I believe, the 29th of April.
Okay, and who participated in that interview?
That was myself, Major Tim Bailey with the Sumner County Sheriff's Office, and Special Agent Jim Scarborough.
Okay. Was that interview recorded?
It was.
Do you know whether or not he was read his rights at the beginning of that interview?
He was.
And all was recorded from first words to the time you leave?
Yes, sir.
Did he respond to your questions during that interview?
He did.
Was there any other interviews that were conducted other than, my understanding, one at Skyline at 429 and the second one at Skyline on May the 5th? Were there any other interviews conducted by law enforcement of Mr. Cummins?
Those two with that attempted on the first night, which due to his state, weren't unable to.
Okay. And with regard to the attempted one, did he make any statements at all?
Not
that would be
particularly.
relevant to anything going on?
No, sir.
With regard to Mary Sue Hoso, you interviewed her as well, is that correct?
We did, yes, sir.
And for context, it's my understanding that she was life flighted on 427 to a hospital somewhere to treat her injuries, correct?
That's what I believe. Yes, sir.
And do you know the date upon which you interviewed her?
Not the specific date.
Do you have do you know how many days or weeks after 427? Do you have a rough estimate as to when you interviewed her?
I know I'd spoken with her the week following the incident, but not, that was more of a informal to see how she was doing, because she did have significant injuries to her head. I would say within the past 2 weeks was when I had a recorded interview with her.
Within the past 2 weeks of today?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact date with me right now.
Okay. And when you conducted the interview with her, did she appear to be coherent to you?
For the most part.
Okay. And
Yes, sir.
I guess you, to kind of cut to the chase, you specifically asked her something to the effect, do you remember what happened?
We did.
And is it fair to say that she said she doesn't remember what happened?
Regarding the incident, no, sir.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the incident at the restaurant.
Yes, sir.
And that's a fully recorded interview as well?
It is.
Are you also responsible for the investigations of the death of Ms. Shirley Hurley?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are you responsible for the investigation of the death that was done as well?
No, sir.
You're not responsible?
No, sir. Sumner County Sheriff's Office is responsible for that investigation.
Is there any particular reason why you would handle the Charles Brown one and Ms. Hurley and not the Dunn case?
The district attorney or the sheriff or the chief of police there's a request process where they can request for assistance, and they can ask for us to lead the investigation or to assist. And I'm not aware of anything from the Dunn case on a request for assistance.
Maybe 1 second.
Sure.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you redirect?
No redirect.
Okay. Thank you, officer. You're welcome to stay in the courtroom. You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Miranda Gaddis.
Edis or Gaddis?
Gaddis.
Gaddis. Ms. Gaddis, if you'll come up and have a seat here, please. I believe you were sworn in earlier.
Yes, sir, I
Okay.
was.
All right. Please speak into the mic. All right, gentlemen.
Would you state your full name, please?
Miranda Gaddis,
Will you spell your last name, please?
Gaddes.
All right. And what is your occupation or profession?
I work for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Forensic Services Division, and I'm a forensic scientist assigned to the microanalysis, or what's also known as the trace evidence unit within the laboratory.
How long have you been with the TBI?
Almost 13 years.
Would you tell us about your background? Where did you get your education?
I received a Bachelor of Science degree from Cumberland University in 2002. I was then
In what?
in biology and chemistry.
Okay.
I was then hired by an environmental laboratory where I worked as a chemist for approximately 5 years. I then came to work for TBI, at which time I underwent both in-house and external intensive training in the areas of paint analysis, fiber analysis, shoe and tire track comparisons, physical comparisons, as well as the preservation, collection, and documentation of crime scene evidence. I have also attended and successfully completed training courses at the McCrone Research Institute in Chicago, Illinois, Hook College of Microscopy in Westmont, Illinois, as well as a crime scene course at the National Forensic Science Technology Center in Largo, Florida, and a year-long shoe and tire track course at that same place.
Is it a part of your job, your responsibilities to go to the scenes of violent crimes during your investigations?
Yes, sir. I am also a member of the TBI's Violent Crime Response Team.
It's called the VCRT, I believe it is.
Yes, sir.
All right. How many violent crime scenes have you attended?
Over 100 crime scenes.
Okay. Have you ever testified as an expert witness before in the field of microanalysis?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times approximately?
Approximately 50 times.
Is that in state court and federal court as well?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. At this point, Judge, I'd like to ask that you declare her as an expert so she can give her opinion.
Any objection? All right. We'll allow Ms. Gaddis to testify as an expert in the field of forensic science.
Are you a member of the violent crime response team now?
Yes, sir, I am.
Were you called to go with the team as a member on April 27th at 1177 Charles Brown Road.
Yes, sir, I was.
What did you do when you got there?
When we first arrive on scene, we typically get briefed by either a local law enforcement officer or one of our TBI agents. When we arrived on scene here, we were briefed by one of our agents. They give us an overall idea of what they think the scene is comprised of. They also told us on this scene that the subject that they believed was involved with this event was still in the area, and so we were then told or instructed to kind of wait for a search warrant to come on scene, as well as wait to see if the subject was apprehended because he was in the area.
Did either one or both of those eventualities occur?
Yes, sir. After we were there for some period of time, the search warrant arrived on scene. Probably 20 or 30 minutes after the search warrant, we could hear gunfire, and we could hear over the radio that the subject had been apprehended.
All right. Before the search warrant arrived, did you or any other member of the team go into the residence there?
We did not, no, sir.
All right. You waited until the search warrant arrived and you went in?
Yes, sir, we did.
Would you just give us a general description of what you saw when you went in there, just generally speaking?
Upon walking onto the front porch, I could see that there was some evidence located outside. Walking in the front door, I could see a victim lying on the couch in the living room. I could see what appeared to be many possible shoe impressions and what appeared to be blood. I did a walk through the scene, and because we knew that there were animals inside the residence that animal control wanted to come get from the scene. So I wanted to look to make sure there wasn't any fragile evidence that could be lost prior to animal control coming in. So I could see that what appeared to be blood inside the residence appeared dry, and I felt okay with the animal control coming to remove the animals. So I then exited and spoke to that individual.
What kind of animals were in the house at that point?
There were several dogs and cats inside the residence.
Okay. And you said something about the evidence being dry, or what was it that you were concerned about?
Typically with my unit, I work in the microanalysis unit. I'm looking for shoe prints, tire tracks, fragile trace evidence that may be lost. And so I go in initially and look for things like dusty shoe impressions, or things that if people walk on that evidence, or if a group of individuals come in, that evidence could be lost. So I don't want that to happen. So I came in and initially just saw that it looked like reddish brown stain or what appeared to be blood, and there were shoe impressions everywhere. I looked for dusty shoe impressions, but I did not see any present.
So your conclusion was that it wouldn't harm the crime scene for animal control to come in and get the animals out?
Yes, sir. We'd like the animals to be removed for both our safety as well as the evidence within the residence. It's better if the animals are removed from a residence prior to us processing.
Can you give me just a minute?
Sure.
come up for a second. Yeah, you come up here behind me. Okay. I'm gonna push this button, but you still take it down, okay? You stand up here. This is what I'm doing while we're up here talking. At the end of the hearing, I'm gonna ask if you have any objection, you returning all of the exhibits back to the state. I mean, they're all paper exhibits, you're gonna get them all, it's gonna be equal. And the state's gonna be the only one that has them. I'm not gonna keep them at the court here. Okay, so that may solve the problem. Yeah.
It would, I would like to say that, for the purpose of this hearing, these pictures are still so
Sure, yeah, be glad. We'll help you. Thank you. All right, General.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, you give us a general description of what you saw inside the trailer, but now can you be more specific as to what you discovered?
So typically, the way we approach a crime scene is we begin by the initial walkthrough just to get an idea of what the overall scene looks like and looking for that fragile evidence. Once that's happened, I will get a camera and take overall photographs or general photographs of that crime scene to document exactly what the scene looked like when we approached the crime scene when we arrived. We also then do a video of the crime scene so that that's also documented. Once that's happened, then we will start gathering markers and marking evidence. Upon entering this to take overall photographs was the first time I had really been in every room within the crime scene. I could see that there appeared to be 2 victims in the living room, 1 victim on the couch, and then I could see a foot sticking out from underneath a love seat. When you entered the residence in the front door to the right, which is what we call bedroom 1, you go down a hallway, and at the end of that bedroom, there were 2 victims located in that room, as well as I was told by the first responding deputy that the surviving victim was also found in that room on the bed. The 2 victims within that bedroom were blocking the door. We could not really open that bedroom door very far, maybe a foot or a foot and a half, because there were 2 victims laying right behind the door. When you went into the front door of the residence and went to the left, you would travel through the living room, through the kitchen, down a hallway, and in the bedroom at the end of that hallway were 2 more victims. One victim, you could see his feet lying on the bed, but he was covered with a comforter, so you could really not see that victim. And then the other victim we found later on, there was a recliner turned over in that room, and we could not see that there was another victim under that recliner until we processed the evidence to get to that point.
Was that actually the last victim that was found, the victim under the recliner?
Yes, sir, it was.
That took a while to locate that person, is that right?
Yes, sir, because we process evidence from the exterior of the residence into getting to the victims last. We want to preserve all the evidence up to the victim, so that's done first.
All right. We've got a picture here I'd like to pass to you.
But before you pass the picture, let me ask, just so I'm clear, how many bodies did you find in the house?
There were 6 victims still in the residence deceased.
Okay. All right, sorry, Judge.
I'd like to pass this picture up first.
and ask if you can identify that.
Yes, sir, this appears to be the victim that was, as you enter the residence and go to the right, the bedroom that we call bedroom number 1. This appears to be the victim that was blocking the door from opening, and we later found out that it was Rachel McLaughlin P.
You came later on to learn the names of each one of the victims, did you not?
Yes, sir.
All right, and this is a picture of who?
Rachel McLaughlin P.
All right, I'd like to make that an exhibit, please.
That'll be exhibit number 7, if you'll pass that over to me.
Could you describe the injuries that you saw on Rachel McLaughlin P?
She appeared to have, she was covered in what appeared to be blood. It was very difficult to tell what sort of injury she had. She had most of the blood appeared to be concentrated around her head, but her body also had lots of what appeared to be blood covering it. So it was hard to tell with any of the victims, honestly, in this residence to see the injuries because there was so much blood present.
All right. Was there anything about the position of the body or the placement of the body that was a little unusual to you?
When you came into the residence, if you shut the front door, there was a large pool of what appeared to be blood beside the door. And there was some blood spatter on the wall around that. And then down the hallway toward that bedroom 1 where this victim was located, there were drag marks down the hallway that appeared to be in blood. So it seemed odd that there was not a body there, but it appeared as though it had been moved.
Would that have been Rachel's body that had been dragged?
Yes, sir, it appeared as though it was her that was dragged.
Now, I've got another picture here.
Can you identify that picture?
Yes, sir, this appears to be the other victim that was found in the bedroom with Rachel McLaughlin P. This appears to be Charles Wholesale, who was laying in the opposite direction from her. She was blocking the door, and then he was laying, their legs were kind of overlapped, and he was laying opposite from her in that bedroom number 1.
Did you notice his injuries?
We really could not make entrance into that room for some time, and so I could see that there was what appeared to be blood all around his head. I didn't notice any injuries to his body. We could see most of his body, and I did not notice any injuries there, so it appeared as though he had most injuries to the head.
All right. Now, you mentioned finding a body on the sofa inside the living room.
Yes, sir.
We got 2 pictures I'd like to pass to you.
You want to make this other one?
Yes, I'm
exhibit
sorry.
number 8?
Yes, sir, thank you. Can you identify these 2 pictures?
Yes, sir. These are the photographs that were taken upon entering the residence and the victim laying on the couch, which was later identified as Marcia Knuckles.
All right. Could you see her injuries?
She really didn't appear to have as many injuries to her. She had what appeared to be blood coming out of her nose and mouth, but there wasn't any injuries that were as visible as it appeared on the other victims.
When you entered the scene pursuant to the search warrant, did you see any evidence of oxygen being used?
Yes, sir. Behind this victim on the couch, there was some sort of oxygen machine that was running right beside the couch. This victim did not have the oxygen on at the time. I assumed that it was her oxygen machine, but that oxygen machine was on while we were processing the scene.
Still running while you were doing it?
Yes, sir, it was.
I'd like to make that the next exhibit collected, Judge.
Okay, this will be collected number 9.
identify that picture?
Yes, sir, this is the victim that was in bedroom number 3. So when you came into the residence, if you went to the left and went through the living room and kitchen and down the hallway, this is the victim that was laying on the bed in that bedroom covered with a comforter, and we later identified him as David Cummins.
Was anybody in the same room with David Cummins?
Yes, sir, Clara Cummins was also in that room.
That's the lady that you said was under the recliner?
Yes, sir, we could not see her body. That door we could also not open when we entered the residence because the recliner and other stuff on the floor was blocking us from being able to open that door also.
I'd like to make that the next exhibit, Your Honor.
Exhibit number 10.
I'll ask you 2 more photographs, and I'd like to ask you if you can identify those photographs.
Yes, sir, this is the other victim that was in the bedroom with David Cummins that I stated was later identified as Clara Cummins.
Is there anything of interest to you as an investigator in that particular picture, other than the fact of her body there?
There was a broken, appeared to be the stock of a rifle next to her body underneath the recliner.
All right, is that visible in that picture there?
Yes, sir, it is.
I'd like to make that the next exhibit.
Okay, exhibit 11.
Could you tell what kind of injuries she had?
She had extensive injuries around one eye, I know, because her eye was visible and you could tell that the bones were broken around her eye. She had extensive head trauma. The rest of her body appeared very covered in blood, so it was hard to tell what other injuries she had at that time.
For the court reporter, that's collective exhibit 11. There's 2 pictures there.
And then 2 more pictures. Can you identify those pictures?
Yes, sir, this was the juvenile victim that was underneath the love seat in the living room with Marcia Knuckles. She was later identified as Sapphire McLaughlin P.
All right, what is the first picture there that you're looking at? What does it show?
This just shows inside the residence what we could actually see of this victim. When you came into the residence, straight in front of the door was where the love seat was located. There was just 1 foot sticking out from underneath the love seat. You could not see the rest of her body until the love seat was removed off of the top of her.
And the second picture, what does it show?
The second picture is after the love seat is removed, and it shows Sapphire with a baseball bat underneath her, as well as what appears to be a broken rifle underneath her head.
All right, those visible there in the picture?
Yes, sir, they are.
Where exactly was what part of the rifle is there in the picture?
It appeared to be the barrel and the other part of the rifle. It was missing the stock, which at the time we assumed was what was in the bedroom with Clara Cummins.
And where was it in relation to Sapphire's body?
Sapphire was in the living room, so if you left the living room and went through the kitchen and down the hallway, it was in bedroom number 3 with David and Clara.
I'm sorry, where is the barrel of the rifle in relation to Sapphire's body?
Okay, I'm sorry. It was located underneath her arms and face.
Okay. And how was Sapphire dressed when you found her body?
She had on socks and a bra, and her bra was partially pulled up off of one breast.
All right. That's all she had on.
Yes, sir.
have you just recently determined, or not determined, but been advised as to whether or not there's any evidence at this point of a sexual assault on Sapphire?
I know that sexual assault kits were collected at the medical examiner's office, to my understanding. I'm not sure if, I don't believe there was anything found on Sapphire at this time, but that would be for the DNA or serologist
Right.
person to testify to.
I don't believe the impression that we have evidence that there was evidence of a sexual assault. At this point, there's no evidence that we have that would indicate that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There's still more investigation being done.
Correct, yes, sir.
We'll make the last picture an exhibit.
Collective exhibit, Judge.
Okay, collective exhibit number 12. And for the record, we're gonna make all the pictures from the crime scene, we're gonna seal these so they're not gonna be available to the public.
Elder, I'd like to get one of these exhibits back from you.
You know which one?
Clara, it says Clara there.
This one? The exhibit number 11. Collective exhibit 11.
Looking at collective exhibit 11, I'd like to ask you if you were able to obtain any footprints there in that particular area next to Clara's body.
Yes, sir. I collected shoe impressions from each area within the residence where the victims were located.
Are there visible footprints in that particular picture?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, do you have any idea how many footprints you just roughly obtained in the whole house?
I mean, I would guess somewhere around the neighborhood between 50 and 100 shoe impressions located in the residence.
All right. Did you have anything to compare the footprints to?
On scene or afterwards?
Later on, not on the scene, later on.
Yes, sir. I was able to obtain 2 pair of shoes.
All right. Now, could I get the exhibits of the shoes?
You may. One is collective number 6. That's part of 6. The other is exhibit number 4.
Looking at exhibit number 4, that's already been introduced into evidence, what we call the ladies' shoes. Did you make any comparisons between exhibit number 4 and any of the footprints that you discerned there at the house on 1177 Charles Brown Road?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. What were the results of your comparison?
The official report has not come out yet, however, it still has a quality procedure to go through at the laboratory, but it has been verified already by another examiner. There were 12 shoe impressions in a reddish-brown stain located within the scene with the tread design that was similar to these shoes. Of those 12, I had 5 impressions that were made by a left shoe and 7 impressions that were made by a right shoe. Of those 5 left impressions, there was one that had individual characteristics present to identify the left shoe as having made one of the impressions inside the residence. There was another one of the left shoe impressions that had one individual characteristic, so it appears as though it's that shoe or another shoe with those same characteristics present. And then the other 10 that were present are consistent with class characteristics to the left and right shoes.
Okay. And they were compared to, the impressions were compared to exhibit before?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you do any shoe comparisons over where Ms. Fairley was found?
We went to Miss Furley's residence on May 1st. We were waiting for Miss Furley's son to come give us access to the inside of that residence. During that time, we walked outside the residence. There was a barn located behind her residence. When I walked into the barn, I noticed that there were 3-dimensional shoe impressions that appeared consistent with shoe impressions that were also seen at 1177 Charles Brown Road. So I collected the shoe impressions within that barn. The son then came to that residence and gave us access to the inside. Upon walking inside that residence, there appeared to be a partial shoe impression, the same that was consistent with the shoe impressions at 1177 Charles Brown Road, and it appeared to be in a reddish-brown stain at that location also.
All right. Did you have any shoes to compare the impressions to?
I got shoes after that, yes, to do a comparison. I have not done that full comparison yet.
All right. Did you find any shoes other than the shoes there in exhibit number 4 there during the course of the search warrant?
Yes, sir. At 1177 Charles Brown Road, we began removing panels on the wall or any area where shoes could be hidden because they weren't somewhere just visible as we searched the residence. Upon walking through the living room and kitchen to your left and down that hallway, there is a washer and dryer located next to a bathroom in that hallway. There was a blanket that was used, it appeared to be used as sort of a curtain for the restroom, and so that blanket was kind of pushed behind the washer, so I moved that blanket and pulled the washer out, and there was a pair of Nike shoes behind the washer that I recovered.
All right. Was anything on the Nike shoes that you recovered?
There were several reddish brown stains all over the Nikes, yes.
I'd like to pass to you exhibit 6. Can you identify the shoes in that particular exhibit?
Yes, sir. These are the shoes that were recovered from behind the washing machine at 1177 Charles Brown Road.
All right. Did you see any shoe prints either at Charles Brown Road or Libby Brown Road that would compare to those particular shoes that were found behind the washer?
Yes, sir. It appears as though the shoe impressions collected from 1555 Libby Brown Road and 1177 Charles Brown Road, that they could have a similar tread design to these shoes, that I found it important to collect these shoes for the tread design present on those.
But your complete examination has not been done on those shoes yet?
No, sir, it has not.
Did you attend the 7 autopsies that were done in connection with this case?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. And were you present while each one of the autopsies were done?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you know who did the autopsies?
It was Dr. Lee.
Did he do all 7 of them?
Yes, sir, he did.
All right. After the bodies were cleaned and preparing for autopsy, could you better tell what had happened to the bodies?
They appeared to have trauma to the skull and head area. Some of the victims had wounds to the arms and the
I didn't ask every question I wanted to. When Sapphire body was found, you found a baseball bat
No, sir, I did not. I can't, I did take, no, sir, I don't believe there was any other evidence other than shoe evidence. I know at the medical examiner's office, they retrieved some hair and fibers maybe from the victims to do a comparison.
It's my understanding that your opinion is, with regard to the Nike shoes, there was reddish brown stains on the Nike shoes.
Yes, sir.
Those are the shoes found behind the washer and dryer.
Yes, sir.
In the Charles Brown residence.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know who those shoes belong to?
I'm not sure whose shoes those are.
Okay. And were there prints related to those specific shoes?
I haven't done the comparison, but the tread design appears as though it could be similar.
The shoes that you did, for purpose of today, will say that you appear to be consistent with some of the shoe prints left at that scene. Those shoes were located at the residence of Dwayne Robinson, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I responded with Special Agent Graves to that residence when we were completed with our evidence collection inside the residence at 1177. So I went down to that residence and photographed and looked at the shoes on that location that evening.
Okay, so you actually went to Mr. Robinson's residence to photograph the shoes?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. And then when you made your comparison, do you compare the actual shoes, like the shoes themselves, to whatever you obtained from the scene, or do you make impressions of the shoes and then compare impressions? Exactly what are you doing?
I do both, honestly. So while on scene, we have several methods of collecting the shoe impression evidence. On this scene, typically we will try to cut up the flooring if possible and bring the flooring back to the laboratory to process that evidence. There were so many shoe impressions overlapping on this scene that it was not really feasible to cut up all of the flooring from that residence and bring it back. So I take a chemical to enhance shoe impressions on scene that reacts with hemoglobin, and it will turn a violet color when it's sprayed in the residence. So what I do is I go in, I identify those shoe impressions, I place markers on that evidence. I then photograph all of those shoe impressions to scale, which means I place a ruler right beside the shoe impression and I photograph it with a camera and tripod. Once I've photographed them the first time through, then I will spray my chemical and it will either enhance shoe impressions that were already visible, or it may bring up additional shoe impressions that I could not even see prior to spraying the chemical. Once those have been located, if there are additional shoe impressions, then I mark those items of evidence and then I photograph all the shoe impressions after they've been sprayed with the chemical again with a ruler in place. So my collection technique on scene is basically through photography. Once I get back to the laboratory, then we submit that evidence to our evidence receiving unit. I then get that evidence from the evidence receiving unit. I will document the evidence, and so I will go through all the photographs, document what marker numbers were in each photograph, how many shoe impressions I think are present in each photograph, and then once I've documented all that information as far as how many tread designs are present or any other information, then I will open up the shoes. Once I've opened up the shoes, I do a visual exam to see if the tread design appears consistent. If the pattern appears consistent on those shoes, then I will make test impressions of the shoes.
Is it fair to say that you try to obtain as many shoe impressions as you could from this scene?
I photograph every shoe impression because I don't know which shoe impressions may have identifying characteristics present.
All right. And have you had an opportunity to determine how many different shoe impressions there are? Let me ask the question in a better way. You said there appear to be a number of impressions that might have come from the blue shoes, correct? And then you haven't been able to compare the Nike shoes to any of the impressions that you had.
That's correct.
Okay. But of the impressions that you've taken, can you tell at this point how many different pairs of shoes may have left behind impressions?
It appeared as though there were 3 tread designs there. I have had scenes before where there have been the same tread design and different size shoes present, so I have not done any size determination of the other tread designs present to determine if there's more than one size. But there are, total in there were 3 tread designs present within that scene.
With regard to the impressions that were located in this, in Shirley Furley's house, you said first you noticed there were impressions in a barn.
Correct.
And you said they were 3-dimensional.
That's correct.
Can you explain that?
They were in dirt, so essentially it's when you walk on a surface and it's a soft surface, then that impression is left in a 3-dimensional capacity. And so I just located those, place markers, we measured that in, drew it, and then I poured casting material into those to collect those.
Okay. And then there was a print in a reddish brown stain being located within the house, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Was there just one that you were able to locate?
That is all I saw inside the residence, and I did look at all of the areas to see if I could locate another one. I did not see any more than the one.
And you have done a comparison with regard to the dirt samples at Ms. Furley's and with regard to the reddish brown stain at Ms. Furley's, Shirley Furley's. Have you done your comparisons on those?
I have not done the comparisons with those. Those appear to have a similar tread design with the ones that were located at 1177. So the ones that I have not examined yet, those all appear to have a similar tread design.
Okay, but you haven't done what I would call scientific analysis of it yet?
That's correct.
You're just basically eyeballing it at this point. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. I'm just saying they have a similar pattern.
Okay, fair enough. One second. No other questions.
All right, gentlemen, any redirect?
No redirect and no other witnesses, Judge.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You step down. Anyone on behalf of Mr. Cummins?
We have no proof.
All right, anyone want to be heard about anything?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
Briefly. Your Honor, we'll take these by scene, if you will.
Okay.
And the first, I know probable cause is the standard, and I know it's a relatively low standard that we're dealing with. But what we have with the Charles Brown scene, my understanding is basically shoe prints from a pair of shoes that Mr. Cummins, while in the hospital, apparently told the law enforcement that he had worn before. And then that appears to be the connection. I do not recall hearing any other evidence with regard to a connection between Mr. Cummins and the homicides other than the shoe print. And I'm not certain that that's sufficient for probable cause in this scenario. With regard to Shirley Furley's situation, what we have is her Kia about a half a mile from the Charles Brown location. I did not hear any evidence that there is a connection with Mr. Cummins and that Kia. Any sort of forensic evidence or anything like that. And then we have her in her residence with some dirt prints in a barn and a reddish brown print in the residence that has been eyeballed at this point. And based on the eyeballing and no scientific testing, it might be consistent with the blue shoes that were located at Mr. Robinson's residence. With regard to Mr. Dunn, sometime around 4:13, 4:14, because the fire in this place is at 4:17. And then we have the rifle that belonged to him that was found at the Charles Brown Road. But there is no connection with there's no evidence that Mr. Cummins committed a homicide there. You have a place that's on fire on 4:17, so someone appears to be there at 4:17, but the body appeared to have been there 3 or 4 days before. And then you have his rifle. Now, there might be evidence of a theft, and even with the rifle in the residence, I haven't heard any evidence that connects Mr. Cummins to the rifle in the residence. So I don't even see how you get near probable cause that Mr. Cummins is responsible for first-degree murder of Mr. Dunn in the case. So I just don't think that there's sufficient evidence that's been put forth before Your Honor to support these warrants in this case.
All right, gentlemen.
Very briefly, Your Honor, we have a connection with the rifle, with the shoes, with the manner of death of every one of these victims here. The shoe prints certainly, by the admission of Mr. Cummings, that he wore those shoes for a couple of weeks or so. The shoe prints have been determined to be there in the house, in the blood. And then there's the hidden shoes that the eyeball test shows that it's the same impression. They were hidden behind the washing machine and the dryer. We have the rifle that belonged to James Dunn. He bought it 39 years ago. And from the crime scene, that rifle went from James Dunn's property into the house and ended up tangled up in the hair of the Sapphire McLaughlin P. We certainly established a probable cause. As far as the key is concerned, that was found down in the creek in the same area where it's been determined that the defendant, Mr. Cummings, has gone and was accustomed to hiding back in the woods, and that's where he was arrested after he had been shot. So all of the evidence here does certainly point to probable cause, and I would suggest that it should be found over.
One more thing about the shoes. There was testimony, I think, from Officer Hampton, Detective Hampton, that Michael Cummins had left some shoes over at Wayne Robinson's house, and Mr. Robinson gave Mr. Cummins some other shoes to wear. I think that's an important factor here. I think the state has carried the burden of proof of probable cause, Mr. Cummins. So we're going to bind all these cases over to the grand jury. I have a bind-over sheet I'm going to have you sign. The arraignment date will be July the 26th up in Judge Gay's court. As I stated earlier, the photographs. Yeah. Sure.
At this point, it looks like we will not be going to the July grand jury. We have so much forensic evidence that needs to be gone through the catalog that it's probably going to be August.
Okay. And I don't have a date for August right now. I don't think a date actually has been set yet.
But it won't be July, Judge.
Okay, all right. Well, the attorneys certainly stay in touch and get that date. I'm going to return all the photographs, all the exhibits back to the state as long as there's no objection. And those photographs of the scene are going to be kept under seal. Any objection to me returning these to the state? Y'all are going to get them all in discovery anyway.
No objection.
Okay, all right. Without anything else, that